Why is it that so many people move to Costa Rica only to leave a few short years later? I've been helping people move to Costa Rica since 2005, and one of the things that I've noticed is that sometimes people spend more time planning their move to Costa Rica than actually living there. So in this video, I'm going to explain the top reasons why people leave Costa Rica, and at the end of the video, I'm going to tell you why I chose to leave the country after living there for 8 years. So how many expats live in Costa Rica anyway? The US State Department estimates that there could be over 120,000 Americans living down in Costa Rica. And I would say that's probably the biggest expat population there, maybe followed by Canada, maybe a few countries in Europe, but primarily we're talking US citizens. There's all sorts of reasons that people choose to retire or live abroad in Costa Rica, but there's also quite a few reasons why they leave. So the first thing that people responded about was that the cost of living isn't actually so low. So basically they were saying that they moved to Costa Rica with the impression that they would have a lower cost of living and save money, but the reality was that they spent the same amount or more.
900 colones.
900. And so this wasn't very surprising to me because there's been a lot of chatter since the very early days of the internet about how cheap the cost of living is. And that's exactly the problem, is that a lot of this information was published a really long time ago, like probably 10 years ago or more. And that narrative that Costa Rica is a cheap place to live has just continued ever since. But in reality, the last time I checked, Costa Rica was the second most expensive country to live in Latin America. But suffice to say, Costa Rica is more expensive than people think. And the reasons for this are multiple. The amount of foreigners moving to the country in recent years has really driven up housing prices. The construction price per square meter has gone up, but that's not the only reason. I don't want to blame it all on foreigners. It's also because Costa Rica has really high import taxes on goods, so especially electronics. Cars are expensive, specialty food items are really expensive, and so when you combine all of these things together, the cost of living ends up being higher than people think. But you can get a low cost of living in Costa Rica, you just have to be frugal and plan. So if you live in a long-term rental, or you live outside of the major tourist areas, or if you don't own a car, and if you shop at local markets rather than the most expensive grocery stores, you can get your cost of living down pretty low. It also helps if you live in the Central Valley versus living at the beach, because electricity costs in Costa Rica are really high. So if you want to live right there beachfront, you're going to be spending probably a few $100s a month just on air conditioning alone, not to mention paying peak property prices. The other thing, of course, is that cost of living is relative. So if you're moving from a place like Manhattan or California down to Costa Rica, your cost of living can probably be lower. But if you're moving from somewhere in Middle America with an average cost of living, it could be the same or actually higher. The second thing is probably actually the biggest factor, and it's a combination of having unrealistic, misaligned expectations of what your life is going to be like, and also the inability to adjust to the culture of that country. So if you move from a country like the US that is a developed country, you're living in the rat race, and then you move to a place like Costa Rica that's more laid back, things are going at a slower pace, it's going to be a bigger difference and a bigger culture shock versus if you moved from a neighboring country like Panama to Costa Rica, where the culture is quite similar. And the biggest mistake that people make with regards to this is really not staying in the country long enough to be able to adapt and adjust to the culture. So there's something called the curve of cultural adaptation, and it's really similar to what you may have heard people talk about in business or entrepreneurship or learning a new skill. This is what Seth Godin refers to as the dip. So anytime you're doing something difficult, like setting a New Year's resolution, for example, you're going to start off with a lot of motivation, but eventually that motivation wanes and crashes, and you basically lose momentum. But if you stick with it, then you can usually build that business, learn that new skill, or in the case of moving to a new country, you can learn to adapt to that culture. But if you quit at the bottom of the curve, so let's say you moved to Costa Rica and the first few months go great, you're in the honeymoon phase of your relocation, then things change, they get bad, and you don't know how long you're going to be in that dip. So sometimes that dip could last a few months, sometimes it could last a few years, and it's different for each person. So if you give up at any point in that dip, where you're not happy, you're never going to be able to climb out of that hole and get to the process or the stage of actual adaptation and integration with the culture. So basically, if you give up too soon, you're never going to actually adjust because you haven't given yourself enough time to do that. So that is one of the big problems. The other big problem kind of relates to the first aspect of cost of living, where people have unrealistic expectations. So they might have built Costa Rica into this perfect place that they're going to move to, the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, where it's going to solve all of your problems and life is going to be great, it's going to be cheaper, it's going to be more beautiful, it's going to be more fun, more adventurous. And then when you get there, you realize that it's just another country full of regular people like anywhere else in the world, and you're still you. And if anything, you might have new problems to face that you haven't faced before in life. And so when you've built this perception of the country based around internet forums or that time that you went on vacation there or what your friend said who retired there, and then that clashes with reality, things just going wrong because it's life, then that causes people to kind of retract and change their minds and move back home. Now, the fourth thing that people mentioned was health problems. And this really surprised me because Costa Rica is known for having first-class medical care. It has a very robust medical tourism economy, and this is part of the country's brand image. And so I was surprised that people cited health problems as the reason why they would move back to the US. And then the fifth thing that people mentioned, and this kind of made me pretty sad actually, was the family aspect. This to me indicates that people waited until a certain phase in their life, maybe they retired in Costa Rica, and then once they did that, they realized that they actually wanted to spend more quality time with their family members. People especially mentioned their grandkids. And even though I don't have kids, I could really relate to this because this past year was the first year since I was a teenager that I have spent an entire year in the United States. And after traveling to 60 plus countries over the past 15 or 20 years, I really got to spend a lot of quality time with my family. I can definitely relate to that feeling of being outside of the country and being thousands of miles away from your loved ones, and then really having to reconcile with like, what's more important? Is it being on this beautiful beach alone, or is it being back in Kansas with your grandkids? And I don't know the answer to that. I think each person has to decide for themselves, but this was something that came up a lot. And then the sixth thing was the crime rate. So Costa Rica is actually ranked 32nd on the Global Peace Index compared to the US, which is in 121st place. So Costa Rica overall is quite a safe country compared to many countries in the world and quite a peaceful place. But that doesn't mean that there's not crime and that there's not problems. And what I've noticed from living in Latin America for a really long time is that not all crime is reported, right? So whether it is intentional or not, a lot of things have happened in the expat community that I haven't personally seen published in the English language newspaper, the Tico Times, or in the largest Spanish language newspaper, La Nación. There is probably a higher volume of crime that affects expats more than is in the public conversation. Like, I personally know people who have been victims of carjackings, of home invasions, and so I really can't say that for the US. Like, I don't know many people who have been affected by violent crimes at the rate that I have in the expat community. And maybe it's because it's a lower population there and it's a smaller, more tight-knit community. So, you know, stories travel really quickly through the coconut wire, but there are quite a few horror stories. And I think that sometimes people get scared by that when they move down, or sometimes they have that experience themselves. So that is definitely a really serious concern and something that it seems like Costa Rica is taking seriously, because they know that this is bad for their image as an ecotourism destination, but also as an expat retiree destination. It's very common to have to live in a gated community or live behind bars on your windows or have a security guard who sometimes can be corrupted by criminals. And I personally have seen a woman get mugged outside of my front door in Romoser. I used to drive with a fake wallet in the console of my car. I had my car broken into multiple times at the beach. I also know a surfer who hid his keys outside of his Toyota Prado, and someone was watching where he hid his keys, and they actually stole his car. So you just have to be really aware, really careful in Costa Rica. Don't leave anything out in plain sight. Don't leave anything on the seat of your car. Lock up valuables in your house, and yeah, just be careful. The next thing that people said was talking about all of the negativity from other expats and also in forums. So it made me sad to think that expats that once really wanted to move to Costa Rica are living in Costa Rica right now and aren't happy. But they're also negative about living there to other expats that want to move to Costa Rica or who just moved down. And so if you confront that kind of negativity, just keep it in mind that these people that are being negative probably are still living there. And so they might be complaining about something, but they have chosen to stay regardless. Sometimes it is definitely justified, but there's always going to be people saying why you can't do this thing, whether it's move to another country or start a business or invent something that's going to change the world. So definitely keep that in mind. The eighth reason is really a collection of small reasons that I have put together as one reason why people leave Costa Rica, because I don't think it's always just one thing. I think it is the accumulation and synergy of a lot of little things sprinkled in with some real big problems that causes people to leave. So some of the other things that people mentioned include scams and like getting ripped off, which of course could happen anywhere, but one guy mentioned like he left because his lawyer stole his property. I mean, that could happen. There's actually more properties registered in the Costa Rica National Property Registry than there are square kilometers of land available. So he kind of has a point. But then it also could be that amazing climate that also comes with a rainy season and a dry season. There will be extreme dryness, extreme heat, extreme rain, flooding, the risk of tsunamis, earthquakes, hurricanes. There's things like that to think about. There's bugs, there's dengue, there's language barriers, there's relationship problems, there's all the other things that happen in life that can sometimes feel magnified when you are in a new environment. So it really could be a combination of things. It could be an invasion of bugs on a day that your car got stuck in the river, and a week that you got sick with dengue and your power went out. That's another thing. Infrastructure. Your internet goes out, your power goes out, your water goes out. You're waiting in line at the bank. Someone tells you for the 100th time that they can't help you, or someone gives you the wrong directions to get somewhere. Like, there's really any number of things that can go wrong, and sometimes it's a sequence of things that people just get fed up and they're like, I'm done, I'm out, I've had enough. And so that's understandable. I've been there myself. Only in Costa Rica does it take 2.5 hours to go 25 miles. It can be frustrating coming from a different culture, but you have to remember that you are moving to that country. That country doesn't have to change for you. Every country has its problems. Every country has its pros and cons. And so it becomes this decision for you if you want to adjust and adapt to that way of living, or if it's too much for you and you just want to leave, and that's fine too. We have to get this package today. We got the cell phone number of the mailman. He's gonna meet us here at 6 p.m. in the parking lot of the post office.
Because this closes at 5, so we're doing a parking lot exchange.
Just for some contact lenses and a credit card.
Yeah.
What do you think our odds are, Jamie?
I mean, I think it's probably 60% he shows up, but like 30% that it's at 6 p.m.
Right. He's definitely going to be late, but I think we're going to do it.
We ordered this like a month and a half ago.
we'll just see what happens. To be continued.
So I'm going to tell you why I decided to leave Costa Rica in just a minute. But first, it's important to note that even though these are a lot of the bad things that people reported about why they left Costa Rica, there was also a big portion of people who said they didn't leave, that they had been there for 7 years or 11 or 17 years, and that they still loved the country. So for every expat that left Costa Rica, there is probably 1 or 2 or more people that stayed and really loved it there. I'm just bringing up all of these reasons that people leave so that you know what to expect and that you have more context for if you start to face this kind of stuff when you get there. And so why did I choose to leave Costa Rica even though I continue to help people move there? Well, that's because I still think Costa Rica is a great place to live, and most of the reasons why I personally left had to do with me and my life. It had nothing to do with Costa Rica, really. So I first moved to Costa Rica in 2002, and 10 years later, I decided, you know what? I either need to buy a house and commit to living here, like get permanent residency, get on a path to citizenship, put down roots here, or I need to leave or do something else. And it didn't necessarily have to be that polarized, but ultimately I decided to leave because I wanted to see more of the world. I had spent pretty much the entire decade of my 20s in Costa Rica, and I just wanted to have a different experience. And also the technology had advanced to the point to where I could take my business with me. So when I moved to Costa Rica, it was working in real estate. But when I left Costa Rica, it was as the owner of a remote, fully distributed online relocation company where I was helping people move to 35 different countries, even though I was living in Costa Rica. So it was actually a benefit to me and a benefit to my business model to go live in other countries so that I could work more effectively there and so that I could get to know the ins and outs of living in these other countries where I was helping people relocate to. So it was a combination of just kind of growing into a different phase in my life, having the technology to be able to work from anywhere and wanting to travel and see the world more. And there was also this day that one day I was down in Dominical on a surf trip, and I ran into this guy who I hadn't seen since I was 20 years old. And I just had this flash and like this moment of I was here 10 years ago on this beach as a study abroad student having a really similar experience, and I just felt like I wasn't growing enough. And so I just really wanted to see more of the world. And I would be lying if I didn't mention the safety factor as well. As I mentioned, I would drive around with a fake wallet in the console of my car where my house got broken into, my car got broken into multiple times. And so that was a concern for me as well. That wasn't the reason that I left. Like I said, it was more my personal reasons. But I'm really glad that I lived in Costa Rica. I think it is a great place for a lot of people. It just depends on what you're looking for and what your goals are, what phase of life you're in. And since living in Costa Rica, I've traveled all throughout Europe, Southeast Asia. I went back to Australia where I used to live previously. But living in Costa Rica opened my eyes to what it would be like to live in a foreign country. It's the country that I have spent the most time in other than the US, and it was a big part of my expat journey. So what do you think? Did any of these things surprise you? Why or why not? Let me know in the comments below. Give this video a thumbs up if you liked it or learned something new, and click on one of these thumbnails to watch more videos that help you work online and travel the world.
All right, Mr. Mailman.
Hello.
Hola.
Gracias. Thank you.
All right, this is the package.
This is 2 months in the waiting here. Whew. I see
Your
it
credit
there.
card. Oh,
My
there
credit
it is.
card. Yes.
Yes.